Watch this.
So these people realistically are ghosts, because they're nothing.
Well, they're not nothing, but I guess something needs to be done. For the second straight session, Idaho will try to put its foot into the immigration enforcement pool, but experts say it may be too deep of a dive. Second verse, same as the first. Immigration isn't the only bill making its return to the State House. From what flags you can fly in your school to what school the state will help you pay for. The bird flu hasn't been limited to just birds. We know that. What you may not know is how avian influenza has impacted your local dairy, or how milk is now making a comeback. You know, they say Hollywood has no new ideas. Everything's just a sequel or a reboot. And a lot of times their sequels or remakes nobody really wanted. Well, some could review Idaho's 2025 legislative session in the same way, lacking in originality. We're just a week in, and there have been 13 bills printed so far this session. 12 in the House, 1 in the Senate. And 7 of them, 7 out of 13, are either almost identical to bills that have failed or have been deemed illegal in recent years, or they're just slightly different, a slightly different version or a different approach. 7 out of 13. I mean, Dumb and Dumber was great, but did we need Dumb and Dumberer? Okay, so we're going to get to some of those in just a second, but continue with that vein of sequel bills. How about Immigration Bill Part 2, The Electric Boogaloo? Or maybe more like Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Better yet, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. All good movies, sure. In the waning days of the 2024 legislative session, Republican Representative Jaron Crane from Nampa brought forth an immigration bill. While the bill fast-tracked through the House last year, introduced and passed within 48 hours through that chamber, it was also late enough in the session that it stalled in the Senate. So Representative Crane, just rebooted it, this time very early in the session. No telling if timing will be an advantage or if Crane's immigration redo will face the same scrutiny as his initial attempt. The 2025 version virtually allows the same plot line as the previous. It would allow local law enforcement to enforce, or to officers to check and to document the citizenship status of anyone involved with a crime. However, while the bill specifies just being in Idaho undocumented is a crime, that doesn't mean law enforcement can just ask for proof of citizenship at will. No, that person has to be involved with some other crime, from theft to assault to, running a stop sign.
So this allows law enforcement to go ahead and say, okay, let's do a mugshot, let's fingerprint, let's document you, and here's a misdemeanor. If you're to commit another crime, then it's going to be a felony and you face deportation.
How is that different than the way it is now?
They don't have the ability right now to document. So if they come across someone who has no documentation and they're an illegal immigrant, they can't document them. So these people realistically are ghosts, because they're nothing. There's no papers, there's no identification, they have no name, and they just move along.
They're not exactly nothing. They are people. But as you heard, the first time someone is discovered to be undocumented, that would be a misdemeanor according to this bill. The second time, well, that would be a felony. And that person would then be deported, or at least subject to, according to Crane. And like we learned last year, this bill is directly drawn from a Texas law, which they approved in 2023. And that one is being challenged in court. Why? Well, for the same reason there was a problem with Crane's bill last session, and pointed out today by Boise's Democratic Representative Todd Achilles.
Number one, this just clearly violates the supremacy clause of the Constitution. Right? Immigration law is federal law, and states don't get to overwrite that.
Representative Crane tried to tell the committee today Texas's law is currently being enforced while it's working through its legal issues, and that's why Idaho should not worry about any constitutional challenges to this one. However, that Texas law has been blocked, and opponents to Idaho's version say it likely will be too, adding more legal costs to the $1 million fiscal impact promised by Crane's bill. Representative Crane did address the, quote, feds are in charge of immigration argument during last year's hearing in House State Affairs.
First, we're constantly told that people illegally entering the country are undocumented immigrants, and the federal government has jurisdiction over all matters concerning immigration. This is not the case. In fact, the word immigration doesn't appear in our U.S. Constitution.
Well, Crane went on to say the only constitutional power granted to the feds concerns aliens in times of peace, and it is only established as a uniform rule of naturalization. However, there is something called plenary power that is broad and complete authority over such things not explicitly described in the Constitution, things like immigration. And this power has been granted to Congress by the U.S. Supreme Court, saying it comes from the Constitution simply because of the establishment of the federal government. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, Congress shall have the power to make all laws necessary and proper, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States. But I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy with a Google machine. So we did speak with an attorney. J.J. Despain is an immigration lawyer in Boise, and he says this bill, this current one and the previous one, has more than a tinge of Shakespearean tragedy in it, much like Macbeth, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
But what it shows is the local police cooperating more with the federal authorities, which that could be kind of worrisome. They already have been here in Idaho. We're not a sanctuary state, so it might not change a whole lot, but it does mean like the police maybe are going to cause more hassle for people, you know, say we're charging you with this crime and we're going to turn you over to ICE or to CBP.
When you say it's worrisome, is that the part what's worrisome about it?
Well, the other part of the bill that I think is a bigger problem is the state saying they have power to give someone an order of removal. I mean, the state just doesn't have the power to do that. They can't kick people out of the country. They're not in charge of the country. So
you're saying that this doesn't have a lot of teeth and it's more of just a statement?
I feel like it, yeah, just based on my understanding of how immigration law works, how the Constitution works, it makes Idaho look like they're tough, but the only way they can get away with actually doing anything with immigration is if the federal government gives up some of their power.
Well, Despain did concede the upcoming administration may be willing to cede some of that power to the states. They may appreciate the help, but Despain says that would likely make immigration messy and more confusing. Oh, there is a slight change between this bill and last year's. Just in case it does pass and is signed into law, Crane built in a severability clause, meaning any part of it that is found to be unconstitutional, well, that part can just be scrapped, but the rest will stay in play. Crane expects his bill to get a hearing next week. So we will see if the Idaho Dairymen's Association, Poder of Idaho, the ACLU of Idaho, and the American Immigration Lawyers Association all show up to speak against the bill like they did last year. Well, speaking of changes in administration, anticipating the lawsuit against Idaho's abortion ban will just go away with the change in presidential administrations. One of the Idaho hospitals that has been very vocal about the ban's unintended consequences wants to make sure the lawsuit doesn't just go away. Today, St. Luke's filed a complaint and a motion for injunction relief in the U.S. District Court for U.S. versus Idaho lawsuit. It's the lawsuit that says Idaho's ban violates the Federal Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA. And currently, there is an injunction to allow an abortion in Idaho in an emergency situation because of EMTALA. And they want to see that continue, which is why they filed. And that's also why they filed the complaint, to make sure that lawsuit continues, since the current plaintiffs, well, they're to the Department of Justice. Boise State volleyball resolution is forfeiting the Boise State volleyball resolution for forfeiting every match this past season against a certain opponent in the Mountain West. Well, they got a little commendation in the Idaho House today. Audriel Tackett has that and more in today's 4 and 1.
The majority have voted in favor of House Concurrent Resolution number 2. House Concurrent Resolution number 2 has passed the House.
Strictly on party lines, House Resolution 2 passed the House today, 61-8. The resolution commends Boise State volleyball for forfeiting their matches against San Jose State University because of an alleged transgender athlete. Now the resolution is off to the Senate. On the heels of the Boise State volleyball vote, Congressman Mike Simpson voted for the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. The federal legislation, quote, preserves Title IX protections by making sure school athletics comply with the Title IX recognition of someone's reproductive biology at birth. The act was approved by 12 votes. Idaho has a new Hispanic health care plan. Today, the Idaho Commission on Hispanic Affairs released its statewide health care plan at their annual legislative reception. The plan includes data from across the state, identifying issues facing the Hispanic population and recommending solutions to Idaho's lawmakers.
So we need that data to be able to back up myths or stereotypes about any specific community in the state of Idaho.
One of the suggestions includes investing in preventative health plans. Our team will be breaking down the report on the KTVB and Espanol newscast. You can find that on Friday on ktvb.com/Espanol.
It gives them value because they feel seen. Everybody wants to be seen. They want to feel seen and be heard and protected.
The Boise Contemporary Theater got a $25,000 grant to help with the 5th annual BIPOC Playwrights Festival. The grant is from the National Endowment for the Arts. The BIPOC's Playwrights Festival connects emerging playwrights of color with professional actors, directors, and technicians so they can workshop their scripts. The festival ends with the playwrights' reading of their new script. You can catch the festival at the Boise Contemporary Theater this August. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Audrielle Tackett.
If you feel like you've heard about bird flu for a bit, well, it's because you have. But the infection is fading, and no one is more relieved than Idaho's dairy farmers, and maybe those who buy milk. Now's the time when you text us about the show. We want to hear your comments, your questions, and your concerns. Send them to 208-321-5614. As always, don't forget your name and the hashtag, the 208. Oh, and stick around. We could share yours at the end of the show. All right, we're going to circle back to what we started talking about at the beginning of the show, about how the legislative session this session is kind of lacking in originality. As we mentioned, there have been 13 bills printed so far this session, 12 in the House, 1 in the Senate. 7 of those bills are either almost identical to what we've seen already in previous years, and they've either failed or been deemed illegal in courts, or they're just a slightly different version, maybe a different approach to how they are presented. That's 7 out of 13. That's quite a bit. Okay, so Aspen Shumpert, she's going to give us a glimpse into a few of these State House sequels.
If this legislative session is giving you a little bit of deja vu, you're right. In the first few weeks of Idaho's legislative session, the majority of the 13 bills introduced are just different versions of bills we've heard before. Like Senate Bill 1362, banning any flags in Idaho classrooms that is not the U.S. flag, state flags, or other approved government flags, with an exception for tribal flags and school flags. Today, an almost identical House Bill 10 was introduced to do the same thing.
There's a time to have a flag, and there's other times for other flags.
The bill's language has a few tweaks, expanding allowed school flags and banners, as well as explicitly spelling out no displays for any political viewpoint. Another repeat topic we've told you about is voter initiatives. In 2021, Senate Bill 1110, which passed and later revoked, required ballot initiatives to be signed by at least 6% of registered voters in all 35 Idaho legislative districts. But the Idaho Supreme Court ruled that law violates the state constitution, and the threshold was restored to require 6% in only 18 of the 35 districts, which is the law today. Lawmakers tried again in 2023 to amend the Constitution to try and change the requirement, but it died in the House. So this year, lawmakers dropped the idea of making it harder during signature collections, and instead, once it's on the ballot.
I'm trying to level the playing field a little bit. They're going to have to work a lot harder because we don't get to have full hearings on the issue in these.
Representative Bruce Skog wants voters to pass an initiative by 60% instead of a simple majority of 50+1. Which is the law now. But Representative Skog didn't stop there. He's taking another shot at adding a minimum fine for possessing less than 3 ounces of marijuana. Last year, they went for a $420 fine. This year, they'll go for a lower fine of $300, with an exception for juveniles.
In this version, with the help of the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association to make sure the wording is correct. So the minimum fine would not apply to juveniles. They could still be fined by a juvenile justice court.
There are others we are expecting to hear as well that are similar to former attempts. We know another one that is looming is the school choice tax credit that we expect to see here soon.
I was just thinking as we were watching that, there's a lot of representation there by Representative Skog.
There is.
He's
had a busy few weeks.
Yeah, and the school choice bill, again, that started out as a voucher idea where they're just going to give parents, and now it's turned into a tax credit. So that is kind of a redo, but just a slight twist to it, obviously. And again, we're not sure when that one's going to be proposed or introduced, I should say. Still waiting to hear about that. But they did talk about it as soon as day one of legislative session. It's something they're very much considering and really want to see happen this session.
Yep, and a hot topic on both sides as we addressed for the state of the state, hearing Democrats and Republicans what their opinions on that is.
Yeah, and we're only just a week in.
We are.
So, all right, we'll see what happens the next few weeks. Thanks, Aspen. Idaho dairies are rebounding from a year-long outbreak of avian flu. If you remember last spring, Cassia County dairy cows were the first to get infected in Idaho, and it quickly swept through farms in southern Idaho and across the nation. Hunter Funk is going to take a look at the progress made in year one and where the producers go from here, because I guess things are improving, right? Hopefully?
Yes, positive sign there. It is improving. It started after cattle from Texas was brought to Idaho, and the time it wasn't known that the animals had bird flu. From there, a dairy in Cassia County noticed milk production dropped in some cows, and they would go off feed, which meant they stopped eating. Then their milk would turn yellow. Well, after the Idaho State Department of Agriculture figured out that it was bird flu, they had to act fast because it was contagious. They also needed to minimize the financial impact that could harm the state's $3.5 billion dairy industry. Well, ISDA says that Idaho was the first to implement movement restrictions on cattle to the affected states. And Idaho dairies were also the first in the country to put quarantine measures in place before anything federally was implemented. Well, as of now, only one of the 35 infected dairies is under quarantine. While the outbreak is slowing down, there's still a lot more work to do.
I don't want to certainly claim that we've done anything so prolific that we've beat bird flu. We definitely have not. We're still seeing quite a few backyard poultry facilities we're still identifying as having bird flu. Just last week there was 4 backyard poultry facilities in the Treasure Valley that we identified. And so it is definitely still out there. But what strain and trying to manage the spread of the virus and how we can observe and identify affected cattle gets a little harder now if the cattle aren't showing symptoms on a regular basis.
And with those symptoms harder to detect, what does this mean for those who are drinking milk or consuming dairy products? Well, you don't need to worry about getting the bird flu. That is, unless you're drinking raw milk. And we're going to explain that coming up at 6. But while it costs the dairymen, quite a bit to get the testing done, treat the cows, if you compare it to other states, we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and so it's improving here in Idaho, but across the country, not so much. So I guess that's the upside, is that things were handled better here, because I know I've been at the store, egg prices, 'cause chickens are being infected all over, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's going up there. Yeah, Idaho with only 35 out of our 300 plus or more dairies that we have. I mean, California, 700 dairies are impacted. It's a lot.
It could spread rather quickly. All right,
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hunter. More of that coming up at 6.
Well, Idaho has just been showing off the last couple of days with those beautiful sunrises and sunsets, and tonight is no exception. Another gorgeous sunset happening over the city of trees where it's 41 degrees right now. These are live looks across the region. Clear skies in Twin Falls, 33 there. Sun Valley, a stunning but cold night. We're down to 18 degrees in Sun Valley right now, hanging in the mid-20s in McCall. Not much happening overhead except high pressure, and that is leading to some stagnant air. So we have our air stagnation advisory that is still in place through 11 o'clock Friday. Almost an identical setup to last week. Not a real strong inversion as the core, the axis of the high pressure, is still off to the west. So that will slowly drift eastward in the coming days. So we may see areas of patchy fog and milder air aloft. That's, of course, the indicator of an inversion. Though valley temperatures will likely stay seasonable through Friday. Even with that inversion overhead, we have nice clear skies, seasonable temperatures. And then here's what we're really watching in the days ahead. A shot of Arctic air that arrives late Friday and will likely bring in the coldest temperatures we've seen so far this season. Speaking of cold, here are your overnight lows. Here's what we'll wake up to on your Wednesday morning, down to 23 in Boise, 20 in Mountain Home, upper teens in the Magic Valley, below zero again in Stanley, single digits for all of you around Sun Valley. We'll have a lot of sunshine overhead tomorrow. Some patchy fog is possible, but another day where highs will get to about 40 degrees here in the Treasure Valley, a really lovely winter day. Mid-30s for the Magic Valley tomorrow afternoon, and after that fog lifts, a pretty pleasant day in the mountains, upper 20s to low 30s for places like McCall, Stanley, and Sun Valley. All right, here's your 7-day forecast. We do have that wind that comes in Friday. Before that, very little day-to-day change for Wednesday, Thursday, and most of the day Friday. That wind will have a bite to it. And as we look ahead to the weekend, if we drop down to 18 degrees on Sunday, which is my forecast low in that morning, that will be the coldest temperature we've seen so far, and we could see wind chills with that wind down near zero by MLK Junior Day morning with a temperature of 16 degrees. So plan ahead now if you have morning activities over the weekend. Bundle up big time.
We're going to start this last section of the show with a question from Alan, who wants to know, would anyone trading in a trade get a tax credit also? No, unless that trade is taken over in K through 12, because that's all this tax credit would cover, K through 12. That's all Idaho has to pay for when it comes to education. Along party lines for an award for the Boise State volleyball players. Guess the Democrats are looking to lose a few more seats in the legislature in next election, says Scott, or maybe possibly they're just wanting to be the people that stand up for a marginalized group of people. Maybe. I don't know. Where are these representatives getting all these ideas for bills they're trying to pass? I would think if they were genuine concerns of the people in Idaho, we would hear about already. I'll tell you, like this bill for the immigration came from Texas. Other bills, they all come from, not all of them, a majority of them come from ideas and thoughts that have worked in other states or they'd like to try here. Not necessarily too homegrown. Here's a thought. How about the legislators that pass a law that they know will go to court, pay the legal fees out of their own pockets instead of using taxpayer dollars? Well, that's why they established this legislative defense fund, just for that purpose. So you could pay for it. You elected them into office. We hear a lot about the weird and frivolous proposals coming out of the Idaho legislature. Let's hope there is some serious and concrete work going on in the background, says Bill. And there is. I mean, the only thing they have to do is pass a budget. So they are working on that, and they kind of do that from the early stages on and getting toward the end. Do Idaho politicians know how bad they're making Idaho look to the rest of this country? Asked Chris in Mountain Home. Maybe they look at it differently, like the opposite. Explains how our population has surged over the last couple of years. See you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.